Hello, everyone, and welcome to Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation's recruiting insider, Jeff Sintel. We're glad to have you with us. We talk about the latest in Georgia's pursuit of another elite class in 2020, and what an interesting time, Jeff, to be coming into this conversation off the heels of a weekend where Georgia hosted a number of top prospects. More on some of that coming up a little later on, including hearing from some of the guys who were there. But Georgia also picks up two big commitments. Justin Robinson, a wide receiver from Eagles Landing Christian Academy, who we've talked about a lot on this program before, and Carson Beck at quarterback. Maybe that's the biggest headline of all. The one-time Alabama commit, a guy that had been thought to maybe being a bit of a Florida lean. Georgia swoops in and gets him, and Georgia fans have had their time to celebrate and kind of think about what Robinson and Beck mean. And you know how quickly the conversation turns around here. It very quickly becomes, okay, what's next? Where's Georgia going to go from here? And obviously some of those big issues facing Georgia, a great way to start our program today.
You know, Brandon, how sometimes in history when like big moments happen, you always remember you were doing there, you were wearing this shirt, you were doing that when it happened. So I want to ask a BA question to start off here. Sunday, I don't know, maybe you're entertaining friends, you're having a fun, rousing game of life with the family or something like that. Simple point here, when you hear about Carson Beck, what are you doing? What goes through your mind? What was your initial reaction?
So what had happened was, if you want to know the truth, I had been with my kids. You know, Sunday we come, from church. You kind of, getting, whatever, hanging out. Cold, kind of rainy day. I'd had my phone out and put it up and charging it. Then you go back and get it again, and you see that little beep come in, that little ding. And I know many of you know that Dog Nation ding when it comes in, either from the app or the website or whatever else, the Dog Nation Facebook page, what have you. And that was my way of hearing about Carson Beck. And I got to tell you, I was very excited. I was indeed.
I could picture you reading his story, putting your kids to bed maybe, and at the 6 o'clock hour, and you check your phone and you say, Carson Beck, wasn't that guy that was headed to Florida?
Well, first of all, I'd kill if I was putting my kids to bed at 6 p.m. That'd be even better news than a 2020 quarterback coming Georgia's way.
Yeah.
There is no 6 p.m. bedtime for my kids, although I wish there was. But speaking of all of that, it does lead us into kind of what is next for Georgia and kind of what are the big remaining issues now that Georgia seemingly has a quarterback for the 2020 class. So we try to break this down. I'm going to pepper you with these questions, Jeff. Kind of the 5 big next level questions for Georgia after Robinson and Beck's commitment over the weekend. Let me begin with this. You mentioned quarterback. We talked about this a little bit on Dog Nation Daily on Tuesday. It's worth mentioning here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger as well. Carson Beck in the fold. He's a 2020 commit. But is Georgia done now at quarterback? What about DJ Uiagalelei? What about Robbie Ashford, who's going to make his decision at some point in time this month? Is Georgia finished recruiting quarterbacks now that it's got its hands on Carson Beck?
Can I give an NFL Arizona Cardinals GM manager response
By
right
all
here?
means.
I think Georgia is done for now at quarterback. And what I mean by that is for now means unless there's another highly rated 2020 that wants to jump in the boat. Specifically, I think folks should look for here to get maybe a different skill set perhaps than what Carson Beck brings to the table. Maybe one of those dual threats everybody wants to have spinning around the quarterback room at the University of Georgia.
Which Robbie Ashford kind of would be a bit, right?
He would be, but I think definitely Ashford and Beck would be a complicated situation for Georgia to manage. It would almost essentially be like they're in different recruiting classes because Beck plans to enroll early in January of 2020, and Robbie Ashford's not going to do that. He's going to go through his senior season of baseball, might get picked up by professional baseball or the first-year Major League player draft. Definitely a top 5 prospect in that arena. So normally what happens here is you get your guy, and then that's your cornerstone, and you start building the class around it. Here's a simple truth, Brandon. Does Georgia need 2 quarterbacks as badly as they need a impact kicker or maybe that extra 5-star linebacker or extra 5-star defensive lineman? Or what about those 2 5-star running backs? Lots of pieces there where Georgia's got to go. Maybe don't need to stick their hand in the cookie jar again for another elite quarterback.
Rich Olenek in our Facebook comment section said DJ Uiagalelei was never coming to Georgia anyway. Is some of this what that's really about, that Georgia gets involved with Carson Beck because it never really had a chance, no matter what Uiagalelei has said about this in the past, it never really had a chance with this young man who's been thought to be trending towards Clemson?
Well, Uiagalelei, you got to look at it. Georgia, like they say a lot, Brandon, sometimes you got to get in that top 3 or top 4 to move the dial at all. And Uiagalelei, it's been trending towards 2 schools, Oregon and Clemson, for for quite a while, and most of the tea leaves do point to Clemson on that. So Georgia's got to get its quarterback, and this is very interesting how the timeline works together. Basically almost on his way to Florida, let's kind of call it an arranged marriage. All of a sudden, it's almost, the 11th hour of his recruiting. Georgia offers on the 27th, I think, of February, and I think he's committed to Georgia 5 days later, basically after a visit. Now, folks will wonder, what sort of ties does he have to Georgia? Does he have any roots there? Well, Carson Beck has camped at Georgia the last couple of summers as well. That's something to keep in mind as well. Also a former Alabama commit. If you really want to impress your friends, you can also say that at one time he was committed to Florida to play baseball. That is the talented Carson Beck. You see all the highlights there. Florida's reigning Mr. Football. That award is actually sponsored by the dairy farmers of the state of Florida. I don't really think Florida and dairy farmers, but that's clever cross.
Well, it would be appropriate to attach the dairy farmers to this because a lot of Gators fans were having a cow when Carson Beck committed to Georgia over Florida.
Or maybe Kirby Smart just milked the Florida program out of another great quarterback.
I'll accept that as an answer as well. All right, moving on to the next big question facing Georgia beyond the Carson Beck commitment, the Justin Robinson commitment. It involves the other side of the ball on defense, five-star defensive end, Bryan Brizzy. We have talked about him a lot, but there is always that school we have to mention. A lot of head-to-head battles between Georgia and Clemson as of late. Is Georgia going to be able to beat out Clemson for five-star defensive end Bryan Brizzy? Going towards G-Day on April 20th, going towards the spring and summer, where Brizzy has said he's going to take some official visits. My guess is we'll be hearing Georgia, Clemson, Brizzy mentioned in the same sentence a lot, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would say that would be pretty big for Brizzy, and very interesting to see if that timeline extends past Clemson's spring game and then into the spring and then into the summer. Because Clemson likes to get their recruits put to bed in midsummer, especially. They don't want to be working recruits 24/7 while they're going through that treacherous ACC schedule. They don't want to focus on recruiting. They want to focus on schools like Maryland, schools like NC State, Wake Forest, and the Dukes, man, of the world. You got to think about that. In all seriousness, though, Brizzy kind of reports or kind of hints at a timeline where he's going to make his decision known on early signing day. Of course, it could come earlier. Anything can change with these young men, but I think the longer this goes on, the more it's really a true fight with Georgia and Clemson and Brizzy, and he's going to give Georgia an official, and it sounds like Georgia's official is going to come in the fall on a game day as well.
The next big question facing Georgia with its 2020 class, some of the ones we'll see answered here over the course of the next couple of weeks, couple of months. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the five-star tight end, Reed Gilbert, maybe the best player in the state of Georgia for the class of 2020, but it was another potential college tight end on campus this past weekend, Darnell Washington from Las Vegas. We saw Carson Beck reach out to Washington on Twitter. Georgia would obviously seem to be interested in Washington as well. How does Georgia's pursuit of Washington impact its relationship with Reed Gilbert?
Well, I think, let's go back to some old school football, Brandon. And all these days of like Mike Leach and hurry ups, whatever you want to call it, I think that the toughest thing for any defensive mind to deal with is an offense that is multiple with its tight ends. And what I mean by that is just monsters that could run and stretch the field, but also block their back plates off. And I think Georgia could construct something with Darnell Washington, about 6'7" and a half, out of Las Vegas, Nevada. Side note, Georgia, if they do land Washington, would be another state to add on Kirby's, Rand McNally map of the United States. Yeah. Georgia hadn't pulled the number one player out of Nevada yet.
That's actually a really good point.
So keep adding to that list. I think that would be 11. They might also add the number one player in Maryland with Brizzy. Maybe make it 12 in this class. But I think they're complementing each other very well. You have a certain skill set for Reed Gilbert and a certain skill set for Darnell Washington. And guys, listen, recruiting 101 is to let multiple guys that you're targeting at the same position know their role, know their fit, know how things would work. And Georgia's going to be losing a lot of tight ends no matter what happens. You remember Brett Seither just comes on board, but Eli Wolf and Charlie Warner are going to be gone. Mm-hmm. Georgia's going to have two bodies in an already thin room. Two seats in that room are going to be coming open. And Georgia and Todd Hartley kind of recruit the way you think, man. And what they want to do is like
Stack them on top.
Why not get the number 1 and number 2 tight end targets in the country? And
well, didn't Miami a few years ago, they had Kellen Winslow and Jeremy Shockey in the same roster at the same time, right?
Correct. I mean, that's what.
Am I right about that?
Yeah. What they want to do is they want to have 2 or 3 guys. And again, if you ever get 2 tights out there, I know this sounds like old school football. I'm certain some people that are on the feed here will recognize this, but when you have 2 tight ends, the defense doesn't know what you're going to do. They don't know whether you're going to run or you're going to pass, especially when you have 2 tight ends that project with incredible pass game, receiver, throw game skill sets, because it's going to be very hard to match somebody up with a tight end in the throw game, a safety, a linebacker, and also deal with a bad boy like that in the run game and blocking and everything else like that. What Georgia does, it's kind of what the Patriots have done recently with Tom Brady when they lined up guys like Gronkowski with another excellent tight end. Remember when New England had both Aaron Hernandez before all that stuff happened to him, and they also had Gronkowski on the field at the same time? They were really hard to stop because nobody had matchups for those 2 tight ends.
Now, James Bryant says, wait, does the state of Nevada even have a number 1 player? Hey, don't sleep on Nevada football. Bishop Gorman's out there in the Las Vegas area. Washington doesn't go to Gorman, I don't think. But I mean, Bishop Gorman pushes elite players every single year.
Yeah, Darnell at Washington actually goes to Desert Pines. The thing to watch there, though, is besides the fact that it would be really hard to go out and cover a young man playing in Las Vegas on a recruiting trip weekend, as the Dog Nation recruiting insider. But the thing there with him is he's made multiple trips to Georgia, just took another trip to Georgia. Todd Hartley, the way he recruits and the way he's really hands-on with what he does, you can just bet your bottom dollar that both of those guys know how Georgia plans to use them and how well they would coexist in the new James Cooley offense.
All right, next big question facing Georgia, and we'll see this answered in the months ahead. Can Georgia add multiple 5-star running backs? What would that ideal haul be for Georgia when it comes to what I think is a real position of need for the class of 2020, the running back spot?
Yeah, several talking points there. One, I think, one of the ways we structured this show today is one of the ways we structured this show today was like, what are the next big questions for Georgia? Not the biggest, but the way this all kind of comes together, because when Georgia landed the quarterback piece in Carson Beck, that provided some structure to the class, because everybody was going to wonder, hey, Jeff, why isn't there not a quarterback on the top targets list? Because Georgia was still kind of circling and trying to figure out who that quarterback was. Now the quarterback spot's figured out. It's a guy like Carson Beck, who I think can eventually earn his 5th star in the 2020 class. I've talked to a bunch of scouts I know, a bunch of other fellow recruiting analysts I know. We kind of all come to the accord that if Carson Beck was in the classes last year, he might be the number 1 or number 2 overall quarterback. And now look at this year. I think he's going to do well at the Elite 11 out in Malibu, and then he'll do well at the Elite 11 out in Fresco. I can see him moving up. He's already number 62. I can see him moving up into maybe the number 1 or number 2 overall quarterback slot, maybe even earning his 5th star. So that's good. They've squared that away. Now the big things in the left. Going to talk some defensive line. We already mentioned Mr. Brizzy. Tight end spot, got to replace those guys in the room. But I think the really big gully washer decision left for Georgia coming up, got to get that running back room right. Got to get those 5 stars. Zachary Evans is the highest rated running back in the country. Going to be a tough pull out of Texas. I think if you could either give the odds of the state of Texas or the field, you'd probably take state of Texas there with Texas and Texas A&M with Zachary Evans. But if
both those programs, they're in a huge head-to-head battle with each other this year. They're essentially fighting head-to-head for what the number 3 or 4 spot in the composite rankings this past year. Mm-hmm. They're both going to be facing a massive level of pressure to sign Evans for the class of 2020.
And I think if there's a school out there that's the vogue, or the school, the flavor of the cycle for him to go outside the grain in the state of Texas, I do think that's Georgia, but it's just going to be a tough pull. I think the high occupancy vehicle lane, I think where Georgia can make more moves is obviously with Marshawn Lloyd in Maryland, another 5-star running back, 5'9", 5'10"-ish, about 215 pounds out of DeMatha Catholic. Already taken a lot of trips to Georgia, already really likes what he's seen so far. And the other one is Kendall Milton. And I think Kendall Milton is the most talented back in the class still. I think he's the number 2 overall recruit at running back. The thing to watch with Milton, Brandon, pay attention, friends. He makes that trip to G-Day. He comes cross-country to see Georgia for G-Day. That, my friends, is going to be cooking with some gas right there for Del McGee in Georgia.
All right, quick final question of our top 5 off the top of the program here today. When it's all said and done, how many 5-star prospects can Georgia sign for the class of 2020? How many is it likely to sign?
Wow. So I'm going to use the term embedded here, Brandon. And embedded here means a 5-star that Georgia has a good puncher's chance for. And that's going to be, I would still say Zachary Evans. I would still say Kendall Milton. I would still say Marshawn Lloyd. Carson Beck, I think, could possibly move up to a 5-star. Then you've got Broderick Jones, who's already committed to the Georgia program as a 5-star. You're already at 5. Then you start looking at a guy like Rakeem Jarrett, St. John's College. McHale Sherman, his teammate at St. John's College out of D.C. Darnell Washington, we just mentioned him in our program there out of Desert Pines, Nevada. Arik Gilbert, number 9. I think a guy like Jermaine Burton is also a guy that could come into the class. He's knocking on the door, Brandon. He's the number 35 overall prospect in the country right now. Wide receiver, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, used to play at Hateville Charter. That already puts us at 10. Bryan Brizzy is 11. I think the number of 5-stars, Justin Rogers, makes it 12. I think Georgia has more than a puncher's chance or a good puncher's chance with about 13, 14 5-stars. We already just spouted out 10. And I think, and even in this guy's, I guess, wildest red and black, sugar falling from the sky dream in terms of recruits, I think Georgia can nail 6 or 7 of those. I really do.
That is an unbelievable thing to think about, and we'll kind of put some of those guys together in kind of a priority list, their top remaining targets, coming up in just a moment here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. That's Jeff Sintel, our Dog Nation recruiting insider. My name is Brandon Adams. It's great to have you with us as a part of the program today. Let me also remind you about a great thing that Kroger's got coming up here very soon. It is the Kroger Chef Jr. event taking place on March 16th. If you've never done this before, it's a guided kids cooking experience, which includes an apron and a patch, a chef's hat, a recipe card box, and a spatula, and it's all just $7, an incredible price for all the stuff that you get. And in the month of March, Kroger Chef Jr. is featuring chicken salad. It comes up again on March 16th, so please go to the website KrogerChefJr.com to find out about the Kroger closest to you participating in Kroger Chef Jr. and how you can reserve your spot today. All right, later on in our program, we're going to hear from a couple of really impressive young recruits. Mitchell Mays, the good-looking offensive lineman from the state of North Carolina. McHale Sherman, the terrific linebacker who was on campus this past weekend. We'll hear from both of them today on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. But after Jeff just laid it out, the big issues facing Georgia right now, let's kind of put some hierarchy to all of this as we check in on our top remaining targets for Georgia for its class of 2020 and kind of set some priorities in place here. Top remaining targets here for Georgia for the class of 2020. Let's start with the number 1 name on the list, the guy that we just spoke about a good bit before. It's the 5-star defensive end from Maryland. It's Bryan Brizzy. Jeff, I noticed in our comment section a little earlier, Zach Smith says that he thinks that Georgia's still in good shape with Brizzy, regardless of what you hear about Clemson, because of his friendship with Trayvon Walker, his friendship with Nolan Smith. How much do you agree with that?
I agree with that a lot. He's really been recruited hard and recruited well by Georgia so far. Those seem like really true friends when you're talking about Nolan Smith and Trayvon Walker. Remember, he's got a sister that's got a Georgia rubber band on her wrist and not going to take that wristlet off until her brother Brian makes his decision. Heavily recruited by Georgia. He's throwing down dunks right now in the Maryland State playoffs. Number 1 prospect in the country. He missed that slot for about 2 or 3 weeks and then was elevated back into it with the recent re-rankings. Bryan Brizzy, about 6'5 and a half, about 290. Really well-connected recruit. He's part of those DMV area. And we get this question a lot. DMV. Jeff, you talking about the Department of Motor Vehicles. What's going on here? Are they driving the bus towards another recruiting national championship? No, DMV is District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia. That's the area they call that little sector right up there around I-95.
Number 2 on this list is Miles Murphy from Powder Springs at Hillgrove High School. Georgia's already got a Powder Springs commit. That's Jamil Burrows. Does Burrows help with Murphy, and how worried should Georgia fans be about Clemson when it comes to Miles Murphy?
Well, Clemson's in there. Auburn's in there as well for Miles Murphy. But to me, this guy's about 6'5", 255. The most succinct thing I can say about Miles Murphy out of Hillgrove High School, school that produced Bradley Chubb recently, another surefire top 5 pick in the NFL draft, was he's 6'5", 255-ish, my friend, and he is a clear outside linebacker. That's how quick he is. That's how agile he is and athletic he is. The feet are something to behold. Really great player. You're going to see some video of him right now. Can hold up in the run game. He won't get caught in the wash. He can come around the edge and bend. and get to the quarterback. I think Miles Murphy checks every box. And let's go disaster scenario, Brandon, right now. If Georgia somehow Dabo Swinney thrills somebody with bowling alleys and water slides or whatever, and let's say Bryan Brizzy ends up at Clemson, Miles Murphy is still an amazing yield for Georgia in this class as an outside linebacker.
Let's stay in Cobb County with the five-star athlete, Arik Gilbert. Most people think he'll play tight end in college. I'm sure you're going to say Clemson's a threat. How serious should you worry about Tennessee if you're a Georgia fan when it comes to Gilbert?
Well, Tennessee's got his teammate Ramel Keaton, who's already there. He enrolled early. They've got his quarterback in the 2020 class, Harrison Bailey, that's also there. Those dudes are in his ear all the time about Georgia, about Tennessee. But Georgia's been recruiting Arik Gilbert since he was in the 8th grade. Neat little story Arik told me that basically the first time, let's have a quick before the Hedges recreation.
Too late.
The first time that Kirby Smart saw Arik Gilbert, he said, "Son, I knew from the moment I saw you, I'm going to have to offer you a scholarship to the University of Georgia."
That's a great story.
That's just how Kirby Smart rolls when it comes to these guys really early. 5-star recruit, 6'5", 250. He had 15 catches for 295 yards and 5 touchdowns in a game. Brandon's son can't even do that when he beats up on Pop on Madden on the Xbox with those guys.
Let's do 4 and 5 together. It's 2 running backs. It's the 5-star from California, Kendall Milton. You mentioned before, it'd be really, really important to see him at G-Day. That indeed goes down. That's good news for Georgia. And it's also at number 5 on the list, Marshawn Lloyd, another one of those guys from that Beltway area. James Crump in our Facebook comment section earlier said that he thinks that Georgia's got Lloyd on lock. Is James' confidence in Lloyd, is that well received in your mind?
I would probably allow a thought like that on our feed today, because I think there's a little bit more lifting, a little bit more work to do when it comes to Kendall Milton. He's actually got to get on campus, see those sacred grounds of Sanford Stadium, see that west end zone, hit a few golf balls off the podium on an unofficial or an official visit, get that cozy first visit high feeling. Need to see Milton make a visit and that go well for Georgia. But Marshawn Lloyd's already done a lot of those things.
All right, let's do a few more of these here real quick. Number 6 on the list, McHale Sherman, the 5-star linebacker. We'll hear from Sherman a little later as a quick preview of that. Certainly seems like he sees a lot about Georgia that he likes at the moment.
Yeah, 6'3", about 233. He told me this week that he said that Georgia stands aside or apart from all the other top schools that are recruiting him. I think that's a nice way to say that Georgia's in a good spot. He also said this, which are true words. I know when you sift through recruiting interviews and you want to know what these young men say, he used the triple whammy. He said true family vibe when it comes to the University of Georgia and the recruiting efforts there.
Number 7 is the 5-star athlete Darnell Washington. We mentioned him earlier as a tight end, similar to Arik Gilbert, I guess along the same lines. Is it a given that Washington will play tight end at the college level?
I think so, but you see everybody kind of tinkering with him as a defensive end as well, because he's athletic enough, big enough. I think he's about 6'7" and a half, about 250 already, 245, 250. I think he wants to be a receiver. He's excelling during 7-on season out there in that thin air in Nevada. And again, nation's number 2 athlete. I think he could be the nation's number 1 tight end if Arik Gilbert stays an athlete or vice versa. Great googly moogly, Brandon. If Georgia could get both Gilbert and Washington in the class at tight end, I think folks would probably just hit their heads on some things.
Let's do 8 and 9 together. Number 8 on our list is the 4-star wide receiver Jermaine Burton. He's in California now. He's lived all over the place. Number 9 on the list is the 5-star wide receiver Rakeem Jarrett. Also, once again, another one of those guys from that kind of Beltway, nation's capital area there. He's number 9 on the list. I guess in the way of Burton, he has some ties to the state of Georgia. How much does that anchor back to this state help the Dogs with his recruitment?
Well, I think Georgia and LSU are really the teams everyone talks about right now when it comes to Burton. That's good news because it's a one-on-one thing. It's not one of those schools out in California that really have a chance there with Burton. So, that's very interesting to think about. There's a lot of ties. He knows a lot of guys on the Georgia staff. I think Jermaine Burton could affect Legend Cavazos down there at IMG Academy in Florida. Those two guys were roommates together when they were both together at IMG. Watch him soar up the rankings. We've always said on this program, Brandon, when it comes to the end of this cycle, Jermaine Burton's going to be one of the top 4 or 5 receivers in the country. He's already number 7. At one time, he was number 20. He's the number 35 player in the country right now. And with Burton, one thing to think about about there is the other guy, Rakeem Jarrett. Rakeem Jarrett's number 9 on our list. Rakeem is also out of St. John's College in D.C. That's one of those DMV dogs. Teammates with McHale Sherman. Here's where it gets interesting. I think Burton is a combination of maybe the best qualities of Terry Godwin and Michael Hardman put together, but I also think that Rakeem Jarrett is another burner-type player, a little bit bigger, a little bit more polished than McCole Hardman.
Finally on the list, number 10, Zykevious Walker, the defensive end from Schley County, and if I'm reading between the lines about what you have said as of late, I certainly get the impression that the relationship between Georgia and Walker is moving down the line pretty fast here.
Very strong, 6'5", already about 260, 270, 250, 260, excuse me, out of Ellaville. Really likes the fit at Georgia. He's visited Georgia more than anywhere else. I think there's some tinkering there. You got to think about Florida. You got to think about Florida right there with him, and also Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. Joel Moody in our Facebook comment section says when you look at that list of the top 2020 targets on the board for Georgia, he says the dogs are definitely not bargain shopping right now. And that's certainly true. This is all Tiffany's taste, high-end stuff for Georgia with those 10 names you just mentioned.
Definitely browsing off the top shelf when it comes to elite recruits. Another thing to think about there, I know you guys are thinking 10 names, that's a lot. Well, Georgia's only going to sign about maybe 23 guys, maybe more, maybe less. 23 is a median number I have for the class right now, depending on program attrition and also depending on guys moving on to the NFL. One last thing there, names to think about. Another one is Vontae Williams, Tay Williams. If I would have extended this out to 11, that's the safety out of Florida, from DeLand, Florida. He was at Georgia this weekend. It was a highly successful visit, even though he was once committed to Miami, even though he's right now committed to Oregon. Watch the Bulldogs there with Tay Williams, because we've been talking about this kid out of Florida for a long time. Richard LeCount and Tyreek Johnson. Remember that name from the past?
Yeah.
Tyreek was telling me about Tay Williams back in 2017 about the type of player he was going to be.
Let me do one quick YouTube comment before we hear from McHale Sherman live on the program today. Winfred Francois here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, says, I hope that recruiting outside the state won't hurt us. And it is an interesting point to bring up, Jeff, that when you look at a lot of those names on there, they are Maryland, Nevada, places like that. And when you think about a guy like Eric Gilbert, he can look to a lot of his teammates at Marietta High School and say that guy is at Tennessee. Currently, you got Bailey committed there. You've got Ramel Keaton, who's on that roster. You may say some of the same kind of stuff when it comes to Miles Murphy, who's seen Georgia recruit other places other than a lot of his friends that he may have grown up with around Cobb County. I mean, how much of a legitimate concern is that? Georgia obviously wants the best players that it can get, but it does lose that ricochet effect in-state when it's spreading itself so thin across the country, or not.
Well, I think Georgia's the way they're going to recruit is they're going to recruit the very best. They're at the point now with their program where they don't want to recruit guys that won't play until their junior year. They want to recruit guys that can push the guys that are already on campus right now. That's why you see fewer in-state offers, because fewer in-state commitments taken as well, because you don't want to see that recoil in the class about what happens when their scouting evaluation on an early commitment softens. There are a lot of examples for that so far in Georgia's recruiting history, 2018, 2019 class specifically there. I think Georgia's going to go just simply get the best players it can, and maybe that kid out of Maryland, maybe that kid out of Nevada is better than the third best tight end in Georgia.
Okay, coming up a little bit later on, Mitchell Mays, the 4-star offensive lineman from North Carolina, tells a great story about how he found out about his UGA offer, and this really is funny stuff from Mays coming up a little bit later on. Before that, though, one of the names on our list of top targets for Georgia was McHale Sherman. Is McHale Sherman, the 5-star linebacker there from Washington, D.C. He was on campus for Georgia this past weekend, had a very enjoyable visit. But as Jeff Sintel has written at DogNation.com, the relationship between Sherman and Georgia didn't just start this past weekend because of a single visit. It was strong even going back to last offseason, almost this time a year ago. Sherman was already singing the praises of Georgia. In fact, let me let you hear a little bit of this. McHale Sherman talking about UGA, the fact that when it comes to the way that he's surveying the roster of potential schools, he definitely sees Georgia as creating a distinction for itself in comparison to the others. Here is McHale Sherman with our Jeff Sintel.
It stands out amongst one of my schools. They really show genuine love, and they really, a lot of schools want to tell you what you want to hear. They told me all the goods and bads about Georgia, but it was, the good always outweighed the bad.
I think that's really interesting. First of all, he says Georgia stands out. That's really, as a fan, what you want. When these guys are getting text messages and envelopes mailed every single day, how do you cut through the clutter? It sounds like Georgia's doing that. And Lloyd says one of the ways in which Georgia has crafted its own identity in his mind is by being real with him. Here's the good things about coming here. Presumably you have a chance to go to the college football playoff. Here's the bad stuff about coming here. Have you seen the other linebackers that are on this roster? So he says Georgia's been really upfront with him and straight with him. And as a Georgia fan, I don't guess you could ask for much more than that.
He's also seen as a combo linebacker, a hybrid linebacker. He's big enough, 6'3", 233. Very interesting, savory point here with McHale Sherman. Last year at the Nike opening finals in Texas, first of all, he was a junior, which was out there, which I know Brandon loves hearing about guys that already get out to the Nike opening as a junior.
No doubt.
And he timed in the fastest man competition. That's out there with guys like Tyreek Stevenson and Jermaine Burton, Rakeem, guys like that, really fast, hyper fast rabbits. He actually timed faster in the 40 last year at 233 pounds as a high school junior than what Nolan Smith did out there in Texas, and that's a very good parallel point right there. The other thing to think about with Sherman is, remember the names Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, Ryan Davis. A lot of these guys, and even Adam Anderson last year was an outside linebacker who played some inside linebacker for Georgia. They just want these adaptable pieces that can do it all, do a little bit of everything. Sherman can do that, and here's one thing I want to tell you guys. If you're watching this film right now on your screen, your device, whatever you're doing, this is the most impressive thing I can say about McHale Sherman. That was him his sophomore year.
Amazing.
That wasn't even his junior film, guys. That was what he was like as a puppy in the fall of 2017. That's how good he already was way back then.
As you're watching, and I'll tell you that another thing that Sherman has said about Georgia is the coaching staff that's recruiting him. He sees a lot to like about this group. It's another reason why Georgia fans may start to get a little bit more confidence about how the Dogs are trending with Sherman. Here's what he said about the Georgia coaching staff.
I feel really good about Georgia and Coach Dan Lanning. I really mess with the coaching staff as a whole. Nick Williams, Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart, everybody. Because when I went down there, it was a really great, warm welcome, to be honest.
So it's funny, to remind people of the timeline here, this is from last off season. Back then, Dan Lanning was almost an unknown. There were not a lot of people that knew a ton about Dan Lanning back then. But you got McHale Sherman saying, I feel really good about Dan Lanning. He mentions Nick Williams and Kirby Smart too, but then he circles back and mentions Lanning again. Well, lo and behold, we're a year later. Dan Lanning is listed as the defensive coordinator at Georgia. It's easy to understand that now when you got guys like McHale Sherman a year ago say, Dan Lanning's my guy. I really like him a lot.
Yeah, a couple things there. This was a good example of, I know folks like to think that the head coach at the university there in Athens likes to play 4D multi-dimensional chess, while other maybe peers in the SEC are playing checkers or maybe playing with their Air Jordans or whatever. But, Kirby Smart, this was very interesting how it worked out. They had Dan Lanning in a volume position, calling, working, basically beating the ground, beating the street, working all these guys, just turning over every stone. And then all of a sudden he's upgraded into the defensive coordinator spot at the University of Georgia. Probably never going to forget that tweet when there was a news outlet that was actually, I think it was even UGAsports.com. They were reporting, or there was a tweet out there that said Dan Lanning was the new defensive coordinator at the University of Georgia. And McHale Sherman quote tweeted that thing and said yes with exclamation points and everything else. That's uncommon. Things about Sherman: 6'3", 233, recovering really, really fast from a knee injury he suffered at the beginning of midway through his 2018 season. The other thing about Sherman, I know there's a lot to get through here. He's now dabbling between a summer decision or an early signing day decision.
I vote for summer.
He can enroll early. His conference he plays in won't allow it. I'm sure Brandon would be happy with a summer decision.
I vote for summer.
But McHale Sherman, very interesting name, had another great visit to Georgia as well. He told me he might come back for G-Day as well.
Let me let you hear one more piece of audio from McHale Sherman. You mentioned things that make him uncommon. I thought this particular line from Sherman made him uncommon because when you're as good as that film that you're watching on the screen, when you're as good as that shows you to be, it'd be easy to kind of get in love with yourself and have a little bit of ego. But listen to Sherman here and how little ego he seems to express. This is a guy who just wants to get better and doesn't want to be, filled up with how great he already is. Boy, this makes you like him even more. Here's McHale Sherman again.
Honestly, I'm not looking for nowhere to be a star. To be honest with you, like being a star would be great. You know what I mean? I feel like I could be a star anywhere I go. However, I need someone that can actually crack down on me and just make my abilities being a DN and an outside linebacker the best that I can be. That type of thing. And plus, coaching is what's gonna make me the better person. Who's the better person, the better football player? Because right now I'm still raw. I haven't really cracked nowhere yet. My potential is still up there. I still haven't reached it yet. So I need somewhere that can really push me to that limit.
Come on now. He says, don't tell me I'm a star. Crack down on me. Push me to be the best person I can be. Help me unleash my full potential. First of all, the Georgia coach would be more than happy to do that. They'll be more than happy to do that. But how much do you love that dose of perspective from Sherman there? I wish more people in Washington, D.C. sounded like him.
Oh, wow. A little political view dripping into the Daily's comments today on our program. One of the things he said, we always try to give you perspective on these young men and not just he runs the 40, this is his weight. They call him Big Sherm because one of his contemporaries, I think he's now a scholarship player at Central Florida, kind of gave him this name Big Sherm when he was a freshman. Why'd they give him the nickname Big Sherm? Because he already looked like a senior when he was a freshman there at St. John's College. And listen, guys, St. John's laid waste to a lot of big-time ball teams last year. They beat Hoover High, and that's George Pickens and Robbie Ashford. They beat Marietta High, and that was with Harrison Bailey and Arik Gilbert, Ramel Keaton, and all those traveling band of all-stars right there in the passing game.
Big wins.
We reported this story on Monday, I believe. Besides all that true family vibe stuff that I know all recruiting folks get into, he tweeted this out earlier this year. And again, you got to like that his Instagram avatar right now is a Georgia picture. His Twitter avatar right now is a Georgia picture.
I'll take it.
I like this right here. As an athlete, 1 out of the 3 will suffer in your life. Social life, education, or your athletic career. Be wise.
I tell you, I'm impressed with that young man. He reminds me a little bit of Kendall Milton, the 5-star running back from California, who seems to have a really good head on his shoulders. Now there's a lot more 2020 prospects you can say that about, but the way that I reacted the first time I heard Kendall Milton speak, it was one of these, whoa, who's that? That sounds like an NFL guy. McHale Sherman right there, to me, kind of already sounds like a little bit of an NFL guy.
You know, it seems so long ago, but Arik Gilbert's kind of in that vein as well now that you mention it, because one of the things I'll never forget about Arik Gilbert when we talk about his ratings and how big he is and how well he runs the ball, I remember, and it seems like so long ago, because it was like 2016, 2017, when Arik Gilbert was picking up his first offers, instead of that common, blessed, thankful to receive my XXX offer from so-and-so and so-and-so, Arik's tweets were researched. Where, for example, if he said something about Georgia Tech, for instance, he would reference some sort of archival data point about their program in the middle of all their tweets, like, how many All-Americans they have, how many great coaches they have. I thought that was wonderful.
How empty the stands are on Saturdays.
How they've got to move to the bins. And, hey, guys, appreciate you dealing with a cough sometimes. Just consider me to be Doc Holliday in Tombstone. The man coughed a lot. In between all the coughs, he had something nice to say.
Well, speaking of super sharp recruits, we're going to hear from another one later on in our program. It's Mitchell Mays, the 4-star offensive lineman from North Carolina. This is really good stuff. He also tells a really funny story. You're going to like to hear that from Mitchell Mays. Before that, though, I did want to make sure you were aware of a really cool new feature from our friends at Kroger. They're introducing the Opt Up app. Now, listen to this. This is Eating Well Simplified. With the new app, you can see your purchase history there at Kroger, and you can get nutrition scores from each item. I think this is a really cool piece of technology. You can track your progress, sort of set some nutrition goals for yourself, and you can scan items in the store there at your local Kroger to find out about some nutrition facts. And maybe if the thing you're choosing, listen, for a lot of times you better believe this is the case. If it's not the best thing for you, the Opt Up app will even recommend some better alternatives. It's a great way to keep you and your entire family happy and healthy. It's the Opt Up app from our friends at Kroger, and I wanted to make sure you are aware of that as a part of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger here today with Jeff Sintel and Brandon Adams. We've still got our 6-pack coming up where Jeff tries to stump me with trivia questions. That typically seems to happen. I'm sure today will be another example of that. We'll also go hurry up with your questions and comments and see as many as we can get in over the course of 5 minutes and give away, speaking of our friends at Kroger, a $50 How About Them Groceries Kroger gift card before we're done. But as promised, I do want to hear a little bit from Mitchell Mays. Now, Mitchell Mays is the guy that you've seen Jeff write about at DogNation.com, and this is another example of a guy that seems to be moving along with Georgia pretty fast. He did take a visit to UGA. That visit apparently went really well, so much so that he's already thinking about his next Georgia visit, and that could certainly be a big one. Here is Mitchell Mays and kind of where things stand with UGA after having a chance to be on the Dogs campus.
My best parts were building a better relationship with Coach Pittman and being able to connect with a current player, Jamari Baylor, and those are my best parts for me.
So I love the idea.
Does Georgia have a chance to get into your visit group for your official visits, I guess, a little bit, or how do they position themselves this weekend?
Oh, Georgia positioned themselves very well. They treated me as a priority to their offensive line, and I felt good about it.
So it's really perfect. I pretty much just jump all over you and cut you off when you're speaking in real time. It's only appropriate that I'd also jump you off, sort of jump over you as you're trying to talk in the clip there. That's you asking Mitchell Mays, is Georgia going to earn an official visit, which is important stuff, and he says yes. He likes Sam Pittman. He's developed a relationship with Jamari Salyer. Good stuff there from Mitchell Mays, and I apologize for interrupting you both, the virtual version of you and the real-life version of you more often than not.
Not the first, not the last. We can digress. Friends will still be friends. One thing to think about Mitchell Mays, though, guys, and you've seen the pictures on social media. Go check him out on DogNation.com. But that young man who just turned, he won't even turn 17 until September the 30th.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I think he looks as old as you and I do, Brandon. He looks like he could at least be somebody's 33-year-old uncle from Queens or whatever. Big, large man.
Yeah, he really is. And he talks some more about his situation with Georgia, kind of what he likes there. Let's hear a little bit more from Mitchell Mays right now.
Georgia views me as a versatile player. I can play all 5 positions.
How do you view that? Lots of guys want to be seen as like the franchise tackle and all the pro projections that go with that. How do you view that? How does that sit with you, Georgia recruiting you the way other schools recruit you?
However, I get the best chance to hit the field earlier, do best for the team. However I can be the best as possible.
So that's another piece from Mitchell Mays I think is really interesting. He says Georgia views me as kind of a combo guy. I can play the guard position, the tackle position, maybe all 5 of those positions. And in the conversation that you had, I thought you asked a really interesting question. We didn't hear this here, but you said now for a lot of guys, they want to be seen as that bookend tackle because obviously that's what the NFL is willing to pay the most money for. And Mitchell Mays, once again, if you're Sam Pittman, you couldn't have written a better answer for him to a question like that. He says, listen, I just want to be where I can help the team the most. And obviously we have seen in recent years, guards and centers have both make, pretty big money in the NFL as well. So maybe Mace is paying close attention to that. But this is another team-first guy that's not saying, I'm only an offensive tackle and I'm only talking to schools who treat me that way. He says, I think it's a good thing that I'm versatile, and I think that I'm going to show that versatility if I get to play at a school like Georgia.
Things I really like about Mitchell Mays. One, he likes to correct himself even when things aren't really working out in his favor. We were going over his height and weight, wanted to know what he was tested at and measured at. And he said, excuse me, sir, I just want to be honest here. I'm actually not 6'5", 315, 320. I'm actually 6'4", 307. And when a young man can do that, there's an internal sense of, I'm good enough. Watch my film. I can play football. I don't need to expand or basically be braggadocious about my height and weight. Others in this industry do it. Others in this world do it. Mitchell Mays was quite fine with just being real, and that was good enough for him.
Well, speaking of being real, I thought this was really funny. So a lot of times I wonder, okay, what is it really like being a recruit? Because we get a chance to talk to these guys, at least for me, Jeff, when I talk to them, they're usually pretty well guarded. They're usually pretty well buttoned up. We talk occasionally to coaches about recruiting when it's feasible, and at least for me, if I'm ever in that conversation, that's also going to be a pretty guarded discussion. But what's it really like behind closed doors? What's it really like in the moment? Well, Mitchell Mays told a really funny story about getting an offer from Georgia, except initially, Mays didn't know he had gotten the Georgia offer because, well, let him tell you the story. I love this from Mitchell Mays.
They actually offered me about 3 weeks ago. I was in like a little tunnel type area, so I didn't actually hear him say it, so I didn't want to assume post a fake offer. I don't want to be that type of recruit. I was in his office here, and me and Coach Sherman were talking. I let him know that I didn't know I had an offer there. And he was like, "Son, I offered you 3 weeks ago." And so it was pretty funny.
So, first of all, I love that story because I love his humility of saying, I don't want to be the kind of recruit that assumes I have an offer from a school like Georgia, but also really funny that this happens to me all the time where I'm on the phone and it's a conversation that I want to be a part of. There are plenty of phone conversations that I'd love to get off the phone on, but sometimes there are things that I want to hear, but I can't hear because the phone's cutting out. And for Mays, he's like the same way. It's like, wait, what did Sam Pittman just say to me? Did he just say I had a Georgia offer? And then Pittman speaking to him later is like, son, I offered you 3 weeks ago. And he's like, yeah, but I couldn't hear you on the phone at that time. That's a very real human story. And I really appreciate Mitchell Mays having the a good humor to want to tell that.
It's funny because Mays, that story when he told that to me, it kind of reminded me like when you get to maybe my station in life and Brandon's station in life, maybe you ever get to go out to a dinner party with couples and you meet new friends and everybody starts talking about how they met, or maybe some couples say like, who said it first, who said the 3 words the first, and the first time it was said, the other party didn't really hear it correctly or didn't want to assume, so they didn't want to say it back. That happens a lot. I've heard that story a million times among really dear friends, but he didn't want to assume the Georgia offer. He didn't want to tweet out a big offer like Georgia. And can you imagine they're sitting there in the room and they're talking about things, and Pittman's making the kids laugh, making the men laugh. He always does. And he's like, man, it would be, how about that offer, coach? And he's like, dude, I offered you 3 weeks ago.
Plus, with Pittman, he had to have a funny, somewhat sarcastic way of responding back to that because that's kind of the personality we've been led to believe that he has.
Yeah, but it's funny because, like, you're an Uber recruiter. You're only going after the best of the best, and you pull the trigger and give a Georgia offensive line offer, which really means something in this day and age.
They don't toss those things around like Tic Tac.
And he's like, dadgummit, son, I offered you 3 weeks ago. I don't want to feel like I'm playing behind the ball.
And privately, he was probably wondering to begin with, wait, how come he doesn't have more of a reaction to being offered than that?
Or how did he tweet it out or something else like that? Everybody else is tweeting things out.
That's a good point, too. You didn't see the fancy edit, the tweet. So funny stuff from Mitchell Mays, and just based on that alone, I wouldn't mind seeing the 2020 class. He seems like a pretty good dude. All right, later on, we'll do a $50 Kroger, how about them groceries gift card. We'll look forward to giving one of those away as part of our hurry up as we take questions and comments.
Rare interruption, sir. One more thing I would like to add to Mitchell Mays, and yeah, I'm having fun with him right now, but one other thing. They partnered him up on his recruiting visit with Jamari Salyer. Jamari Salyer asked Dog Nation to follow him. That's a very good endorsement right there from a 5-star offensive guard to maybe the nation's number 3 offensive guard right now.
Plus, you all should check the pictures out of Mitchell Mays at dognation.com. Has there ever been a bigger contrast between how mean a guy looks versus how nice a guy sounds?
Yeah.
I mean, he looks like he's about to rip the doors off your car, and yet he could not sound like a nicer guy.
Like if we ever had the Anchorman Part 4 with me and Brandon, I would want Mitchell Mays to be going into that alley with the Spanish News Channel and News Channel 4 and News Channel 6, a bare knuckle brawl. You want Mitchell Mays on your side.
News team, assemble. All right, we'll do our hurry up later on. We'll give away a $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. For now, though, it is time to find out how dumb I am this week. It is the 6-pack. Jeff's questions from Kroger. Don't forget, Kroger, a great place to get your 6-pack of choice. But, Jeff, the floor is yours.
Maybe we can I know Connor is a black belt when it comes to graphics. Maybe we can retitle this segment called How Dumb I Am by Brandon Adams.
Yeah.
Maybe vote on that, guys. Let me know if we need to get working on that. Guess what we're talking about today, sir? What's the flavor of the week? What's
quarterbacks?
Circling through your mind right now.
Quarterbacks?
No. So that's
Probably
your first. Can we give him a buzz for that one? Just an early buzz for that one? Not talking about quarterbacks. What else is going along right now in the world of football? Combine. Get him a ding, 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 ding. Brandon, 1 for 2 so far.
I can already tell you I'm not going to do well with this.
We're talking Bulldogs, and Combine. Hope you learned something, guys. Let's go.
All right, here we go.
Number 1. Which former Georgia Bulldog holds the record for the fastest 40 in NFL Combine history? Now, it's not the Combine record. It's not John Ross.
Right.
But is the Georgia Bulldog program record for the fastest 40.
So Marshall was coming off an injury, but he was really, really fast. Bailey, you might want to say, but to me, his greatness was about more than just his straight line speed. Tim Jennings is a little bit of a outlier there, so maybe you're gravitating towards that. Some of y'all are saying C. I'm going to go C too. I'm going to say Keith Marshall.
Keith Marshall. I think the YouTube crowd, I've got my eyes on them. The reporting from the precincts, we got a lot of C's here. What does Facebook say?
Well, C. Hill's even giving you a time of 4.29. I don't remember it being that fast. That's pretty amazing. John William Adams is also saying Marshall. Will Godog says Marshall. Spencer Moore as well. Yeah, I feel pretty good about my answer here.
The how dumb I answer is?
No way.
Champ was a dude.
So, I mean, he was a great athlete. I just don't remember him being that fast.
4.28.
Impressive.
A Hall of Famer. I think he also jumped out of the gym and had a great broad jump, had a great vertical jump.
Yeah, y'all go back and watch some of those Donnan era games when he was playing wide receiver. If you're younger anyway, many of you are old enough like me that you remember those games from when they happened the first time.
YouTube.
Champ Bailey was a really good wide receiver. Really good receiver.
He was an incredible defensive back as well. Never won the Thorpe. That was one thing that I always raised my eyebrow when a lot of things came out about DeAndre Baker this year, never winning the Thorpe. But Champ Bailey, man, things, folks, this is what me and him, I talked about him a little bit when we would always talk pre-show for whatever. Remember us having a conversation once about McHale, and we were going, is that the fastest Georgia Bulldog you've ever seen? Mm-hmm. And to me, the fastest Georgia Bulldog I've ever seen was always Champ Bailey taking one of those Jim Donnan tunnel screens to the house. That guy was moving. Go find those films, the vaults or whatever you want to do. Champ Bailey.
4.28 is a very impressive number.
That's really fast, man. And the count right now is 0 for 1 for my man. How dumb I am, Brandon. Number 2, Stone Combine, sir. Yeah. Which former Bulldog did not crack 4.45 seconds in the 40?
Now, why do we got to be negative?
Okay, 4.45 is a Hercules. This is like the speed. This is like the speed of the gods of Olympus here. That's very, very fast in the NFL Combine. Which former Bulldog did not crack 4.45 seconds in the 40? A, Musa Smith, now living in Woodstock, Georgia. Mm-hmm. B, Sanders Cummings. C, Chris Conley. D, Isaiah McKenzie. Or E, Tavares King. These are all fast Georgia Bulldogs.
So my memory of Musa was great running back in the 2002 SEC Championship. I don't really remember him being a Blazer, though. So I'm going to go Musa as going north of 4.45. I got to go Musa on that one. Career, he played with the Baltimore Ravens for a while, I believe, but I'm going to say that it was not a sub 4.45 40 for Mr. Musa.
I think he ended up being a third-round pick of the Ravens. One little Georgia tradition.
Will Go Dogs agrees, by the way.
Hopefully going to educate some people a little bit about a lot of these Bulldogs with all these questions, because that's one of the intents, not just to make Brandon miss questions.
Yeah.
First of all, you look at all those things. What was the
Santiago Diarn says Sanders Cummings.
Tell all the people out there, Brandon, what happened in Sanford Stadium whenever Musa carried the rock.
The moo.
Almost sounded like a boo to those fans that don't know what's going on. Great Georgia
There's
tradition.
also the era, like the one beef I always had is that was the same era that Michael Cooper played and Bruce Thornton played. You got a lot of oohs going out there for that. I feel like you got to pick one guy to do that with, but Musa was certainly deserving of that. A part of an SEC team in 2002 that led the league in scoring.
A lot of people jumping on the YouTube crowd. A lot of A's for Musa Smith. We've had a great retrospective Musa Smith moment. But actually, the how dumb I am answer is?
I got it wrong again. Tavares King, 4.47.
Musa ran a 4.45 coming out of the draft.
Now, Tavares still plays for the Giants, right?
He does, man. He's really, listen, folks, 4.47 is fast. If DeAndre Baker would have loved that time, obviously Elijah Holyfield would have loved that time, Terry Godwin would have loved that time. 4.47 is fast. And you took that the negative slant there. All I mean in those are all fast dudes.
Yeah.
Which one of those guys did not crack 4.45?
But you also set me up. You knew I'd say Musa for that. You knew I'd say Musa.
I didn't know you would say Musa.
I feel like you said.
One of these days we're going to do a Brandon reverse Bizarro, how dumb I am, where we're going to predict Brandon's answers. What Brandon will answer. Not the correct answer, but what Brandon will answer.
By the way, Ken Feinberg says it's soon going to be Zeus getting the Musa treatment with the Zeus.
Wouldn't that be great?
My guess is we're probably going to see that. I can't wait to see it. Good call, Ken.
Good call, Ken. Moving on, and that's 0 for 2, Brandon, right? 0 for 2?
Yeah, so far.
0 for 2. Number 3. This is a good one, Brandon.
All right.
Who is the fastest former Georgia linebacker in NFL Combine history?
This is a good one.
You got Roquan. Man, that guy was the Montezuma missile. Coming back on there, you got Marcus Howard. Everybody remembers that game against Hawaii.
Yeah,
Boss Bailey, younger brother of Champ, the guy who got up to the 15th floor trying to block that extra point against Tennessee.
Tough question.
Leonard Floyd, who, man, he's a great player as well. The fastest former Georgia linebacker in the NFL Combine.
Once again, my general strategy is to go away from what seems the obvious answer. Roquan would seem like it should be the obvious answer. Certainly game speed. I don't know that Georgia's ever had a linebacker that plays faster during games. But I'm tempted to want to say, assuming he was fully healthy when he ran it, because I know he dealt with some injuries, that Boss Bailey may have actually ran the fastest.
Boss Bailey was all those Bailey boys out of Folkestone, Georgia.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of B's and
James
D's.
Bryant's guessing the same thing. Santiago DR also says Leonard Floyd. David Hill questions Floyd. I feel satisfied with my answer, though. I feel like I'm going to go Boss Bailey.
Let me sound a little Richard Dawson, or for the young pups out there, Steve Harvey. Survey says...
Again! Marcus Howard.
Marcus Howard ran a 4.45 in 2008.
Never would have guessed that.
So it goes to prove what we're going through these combine archival stats right now is that Donnan had some fast dudes on his team, and so did Rick as well.
I also believe the NFL scouting combine is pseudoscience. The whole thing is the whole thing is a total fraud.
Pseudoscience, okay.
These personnel guys stand there with that clock in their hand like they have any idea what they're looking at.
That's what the laser times are for now.
Yeah.
They got 10-yard increments now. Did you see that? How, like Quinnen Williams and Bosa's 10-yard increments were faster than Jadeveon Clowney's and everything else like that? Brandon, is that 0 for 3?
That's so far, it's 0 for 3.
0 for 3.
These are hard questions. But now I do agree with the lead baller. The linebacker thing was a good question, but it was still pretty hard.
Georgia Peach, I agree with you. It's just like the name Boss. Isn't that the perfect name for a football player?
Yeah, great name.
Moving on. Maybe I'll do that one time. Greatest names in Georgia history. Moving on to our next one, and Brandon is currently 0 for 3. Which former Bulldog holds the program record for most bench press reps of 225 in NFL combine history?
I feel very confident about this. Geno Atkins has been a great pro for the Bengals. Owens, Cornelius Washington, no disrespect to them. But pound for pound, one of the strongest players that Georgia has ever had is the man that just hung it up for the last time, the longtime tight end Benjamin Watson, most recently the New Orleans Saints. Watson was a physical monster at UGA. I got to say Watson's got the bench press record for Georgia.
I think Watson was pressing like 540 in his heyday at Georgia.
Yeah, he was a strong dude.
Came over from Duke.
Great guy, strong dude. It is a clean sweep of Watsons over here on YouTube. Wally Smith, Hasheem Spikes, C. Hill, Darren Johnson, Elite Baller. Let's check in on Facebook on this. You do have some people saying Geno Atkins. So Facebook's a little bit more divided on this. We've even got a Jeff Owens coming in here. I got to stick with my answer, though. I'm going to go with Ben Watson on this.
Judges?
Boy, I've gotten them all wrong. Boy, that's terrible. That's terrible. Jeff Owens. Wow, good for him.
Owens put up 44 reps at the 2010 NFL Combine. I think Watson, you were right there. Folks, you were right there. I think Watson was 41.
Yeah.
Atkins was 38. All those guys did very well for Georgia.
Yeah, if we had a conversation of like pound for pound, strongest players at Georgia, Watson may be up there near the very top. Like Thomas Brown's in there. I mean, there have been a few guys over the course of their Georgia career that just packed a wallop that had muscles on top of muscles. Watson's definitely in that group, though.
There's an old Bob Hope joke that says, and I'm going to fill in the blank here and make it fit. Ben Watson has muscles in places that I don't even have places.
Yeah, it's a great line.
Great Bob Hope joke. If you guys know who Bob Hope is, maybe you should hit up YouTube or Google or whatever. Brandon, let's get you off the schneid.
Easy Brown's laughing at me for getting all these wrong. Thanks, Easy. I really appreciate that.
Hey, everybody likes to brag a lot of times on these things. They'd like to say 4 for 4.
This is sort of like Jeopardy. Like you may get the questions right when you're sitting there watching at home, but if you're actually sitting there with the lights on, it doesn't go quite as well. I'd like to think it's the same thing.
Has anybody gotten all these right now?
Plus, I know for a fact that they weren't. I saw one person say Jeff Owens. There were not a lot of people saying Jeff Owens that last one, so I'm not gonna hang my head about getting that one wrong.
You're not gonna accept any persons that say right now that they were 4 for 4 or anything else like that?
I don't know. Maybe somebody's gotten it right, but there weren't a ton of people getting Jeff Owens with that last answer.
Moving on. Got to get Brandon off the schneid.
What Owens wear? 44 at Georgia?
Yeah. No. 44. Which Georgia Bulldog does not hold a program record for a feat at the NFL Combine? Okay. So it's somebody that holds some sort of record.
All right.
Vertical jump, weight, that sort of thing, height, weight, hand size, 15-yard drill, 20-yard drill. Which one of these does not hold a program record for a feat at the NFL Combine?
I have no idea. Chris Conley was kind of a cerebral guy. I don't really know what his record would have been unless he just jumped something amazing. Obviously, Boss Bailey, you think he had a chance to really jump well. Justin Houston's had a great career, although I don't really know what his combine record would have been. Was Dennis Rowland the tallest?
I like what you're working through all here, man. You're doing some good work here.
I'm gonna go Chris Conley, unless he just jumped something amazing.
First of all, I'm going to say right now that your thought tree through that question, Brandon, was like the 0-12 Cleveland Browns going into double
Still
overtime.
playing hard.
Going
Still
into
playing
double
to the whistle.
overtime with the New England Patriots. He's still chopping wood, not chipping wood.
Still playing to the whistle here. Robert
of-
Skip Nagel says it's Justin Houston.
Got some A's. People wonder. Some people are sitting there going, "Okay, who's Dennis Rowland or whatever?" I'm going to tell you right now. Give you a freebie. I'm going to reduce your odds. Dennis Rowland was the tallest Georgia Bulldog ever at the combine, at 6 feet 10 inches tall. A ginormous offensive tackle for Georgia. So there's a free one.
He was taller than Bernard Williams.
He was the tallest Bulldog ever measured and tracked at the combine. So automatically, take that one off your list. You're going to choose from 3. Everybody's odds are 33%. Survey says.
Got it wrong again. I'm going to throw my laptop. Boss Bailey.
So Justin Houston had the largest hands.
Okay.
10 and 7/8 inches. Conley had both the best broad jump and the best vertical.
I vaguely remember him jumping out of the gym, yeah.
Rowland was the tallest Bulldog at 6 feet 10 inches. And now Boss was like third in a lot of things. Incredible athlete. But there you go. There's some now you know a little bit of combine.com.
Yeah, a little bit of combine.
A little bit of combine.com.
A little bit.
And that's 0 for 4? 0 for
5.
0 for 5.
0 for 5.
This one will test your mental powers.
Start of an empire right here.
Okay. What purpose did Grant Field serve prior to housing historic Bobby Dodd Stadium on the campus of Georgia Tech? Rare Tech question. I was on the Tech campus over the weekend and I learned this fact. It was located in close to an early Georgia insectarium. It was built on a landfill, or C, it was built on top of a large sewer project.
Well, all 3 would seem to be appropriate for various reasons. I know it hosted a Pink Floyd concert in the 80s. That's not a choice here. I'm going to go B, it was built on a landfill, because there's obviously still remnants of garbage on the field every Saturday.
Let's see what everybody else says out there in Dog Nation. Eric Anderson is 1 for 6. Julio Jones, Jet All Day Goat, is 0 for 5. Everybody's going dough with all these questions.
Yeah.
C Hill says that's why Tech is trash.
Yeah.
Lots of B, like people like Dan Riggins likes your snap BA moment of the day.
Listen, if I can't get the questions right, at least I got to be entertaining.
So at least you ran for 275 yards in a losing effort,
That's exactly right, yeah.
All right, guys, I'm totally serious on this. First of all, I'm going to say this one thing. Sometimes the jokes here on Before the Hedges just write themselves. Survey says
it was built on a large sewer project. Somehow that's even worse than a landfill.
Somehow it is even worse.
If you told me I had to sleep tonight on top of a landfill or a sewer, I think I'm going landfill.
I think so.
If you gave me the choice of one of the two, I believe I gotta go garbage over fecal material. I'm just being honest.
All right, I'm going to lose it on that one. Anyway, that's Brandon's 0 for 6, but we have a knee slapper of an ending right there.
I don't think I've ever gone over.
Historic Bobby Dodd Stadium houses Grant Field. Folks, I'm not making this up. You can go on the Georgia Tech campus right by the stadium and find this out. They even have the picture that basically proclaims that it was initially built by City of Atlanta prison labor on a sewer project. It was initially a sewer project. Everybody started hanging out and playing games around there, and then they decided to start playing their football games back in 1888.
And all these years later, they still stink.
They still stink. That's what Brandon said anyway.
All right, we're going to give away a $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. By the way, somebody in our Facebook comment section before, Billy and Mitzi Sage said that they were a winner and we forgot to take care of them. We'll hit you up and we'll take care of you if we've messed that up in the past. So appreciate your letting us know about that. We'll try to take care of some of that kind of stuff. After all, Jeff and I are at times not the greatest clerical hands when it comes to stuff like this.
We do got to write stories and produce content.
But we'll get that taken care of, so thanks for letting us know about that. We appreciate you checking out Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. With that said, I have about 5 minutes on the clock. Let's get as many questions and comments as we can. As we kind of finish up on a strong note, talking UGA recruiting, we'll get the clock started, and we will get ready to go here. People are still talking about the stuff from the from the six-pack. Tell folks why you were at Georgia Tech, by the way.
It was the Georgia Kicker, Punter, and Snapper Awards. The KickDoctor.com, Cedric Oglesby, that helps out a lot of area youth, a lot of high school youth, trains and works with a lot of players, does a lot to promote kicking, especially the kicking recruits, the young people that also kick. So kickers are football players too. Everybody loves Hot Rod at Sanford Stadium, but that's the one part of the industry that, you know, I'm going to really take a special look, do whatever I can to help, because kickers do not get the same type of exposure that their other players and peers do.
Levi Rushing says, do you have any information on Demon Clowney?
Demon Clowney, another guys out of the DMC, the DMV area. Lanning, Clowney, they go in deep right there. It's going to be very interesting what happens with Clowney, Ojulari, those type of guys, Miles Murphy, McHale Sherman. It's going to be very interesting what Georgia does at outside linebacker in the 2020 class, because that's a position where they might only take one or two guys.
Chris Branham says, do you have any higher confidence for Georgia when it comes to Miles Murphy or Bryan Brizzy?
Probably like the chances with both, but it's almost kind of like there's a fight for both of those. Those things are still contested recruitment.
Chris Branham also had a funny comment earlier in the show when he said that, talking about top players from each state, he said that he already looked. Wyoming does not have a player listed in the 24/7 sports database right now, so there will be no Wyomings coming for Georgia. John William Adams says, I like these either-ors. He says Darnell Washington or Kendall Milton, which one's more likely to join the class from the Pacific time zone?
All the precincts are not in on that one, sir. We need more data to determine that. The chances are actually pretty good on both right now.
Hey, I like to hear that. Ace Cranford says he thinks that a Beck reminds him of Andrew Luck. Carson Beck reminds him of Andrew Luck. How do you feel about that comparison between the most recent Georgia quarterback commit?
Right now, I think that if we're going to go player parallels, I think the name that initially strikes me a lot with Carson Beck might be Davis Mills out of Stanford.
Okay.
Cerebral, accurate, squeezing the ball. Maybe arm is very good, but accuracy is a little bit better. That sort of thing right now. Davis Mills is a heck of a quarterback.
Ken Feinberg says, which kicker is Georgia after right now?
Ooh, a bunch of kickers. I wrote about kickers last week, wanted to make sure we put news out there about kickers, because really the biggest position that's likely that definitely won't have a starter or scholarship player back next season, the 2020 season, is kicker. Lots of interest right now. I've got comments that I'm kind of sitting on from several kickers that would love to wind up as the Georgia kicker.
Easy Brown says, how about cornerbacks for the 2020 class? Who are the most likely players at that position?
Fred Davis, that's a name they look at. Legend.
Is that a realistic name?
I think that's a name that's in the hopper. I like a couple of guys in Georgia. Seems like the fit is a lot better right now. I think a guy by the name of Dwight McLaughlin out of Texas. He plays for Trinity and Cedar Hill. That's the same program which sent Lewis Seen to Georgia. Those guys are best friends. Also, little known fact, Brandon, I don't even know if you know this. Former Georgia Bulldog, former Alabama Crimson Tide, Maurice Smith, first cousins with Dwight McLaughlin.
Oh, that's interesting.
Do you think those two can share some intel a little bit about what it's like to play for Kirby Smart?
Yeah, my guess is Mo Smith, who turned that into a UGA defensive MVP, he probably has some good stories to tell. I like this question from Jacob Thompson on the YouTube side of things. He says, why isn't Trent Thompson playing for the Atlanta Legends?
Why did Aaron Murray finally get the ball and get the chance to win a game for the Atlanta Legends as well? I think that program, and it's a fledgling league, don't get me wrong, but I think they're only like fourth or fifth coach or play caller right now.
They've had a rough go.
I think they offered Brandon to come call plays in between shows, but he said he was too busy right now.
We do love seeing our buddy Cameron Nisley doing well for them, and it was great to see Murray on the field this past week. Hashim Spikes on YouTube says, how about 2020 defensive tackles?
Ooh, so you've got Jamil Burrows already committed. Nazir Stackhouse is there as well. Think about Alex Huntley. That's a name out of the Hammond School in South Carolina. Of course, South Carolina wants him as well. You keep going down with defensive tackles in the class. That's one spot where Georgia can, still needs to make a lot of hay, needs to look at a lot of guys. Jordan Birch is a guy that's also out of the state of South Carolina as well. Defensive tackle is a spot for Georgia. They got to get the right guy this year, I think.
Anthony Sumbry asks about Tank Bigsby. Any information on Tank?
Well, Tank's a good player. It's just the example of if Georgia wasn't going after these 5 stars that I feel have higher grades on. That's where most of their recruiting energy is being spent right now with guys like Marshawn Lloyd, Zachary Evans, Kendall Milton, even a guy like Seth McGowan out of Poteet, Texas, and even a guy like DeMarcus Bowman. I think Georgia is just so rich at running back guys. Where like LSU right now offered a couple of backs in the 2020 class in the state of Georgia. Georgia hasn't offered those guys because they're going and browsing off the top shelf. A guy like DeMarcus Bowman is a great talent. And you know what, Tank Bigsby, Dejon Edwards down in Colquitt County, they might be top 15 running backs in the nation. But it doesn't matter. Georgia's going after the top 3 or 4 right now. Yeah,
that's certainly a very interesting scenario. However, though, I heard the buzz. That means our 5 minutes are up. Why don't we make Anthony Sunbury the winner of our $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card for today?
Anthony's question was?
About Tank Bigsby.
Tank Bigsby, and also he's a FaceTuber. He's a Facebooker, correct?
He's on Facebook. That's exactly right.
We're going to reach out to you, Anthony. Please look for your messenger. We're going to try and get you a $50 Kroger gift card. Before we put a bow on this show, I've got one question for Brandon.
Oh my!
One question. It's nothing to do.
It's another one for me to get wrong.
It's nothing to do with the combine. It's nothing to do with the "How Dumb I Am" segment. That's over. I want to know your true feelings on this right now. Looking at the Georgia's recruiting class as it is composed now, I know greed is good. You always would trade everything you got for just a little bit more.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the current construction of the 2020 recruiting class? What is this lacking right now?
Well, it's slow in comparison to a school like LSU, which has already added a lot of big-time names, but slow doesn't bother me anymore, given the way the 2018 class was even slower. It obviously went on to great heights. Getting Carson Beck in place makes me feel much better about the progress all of this is making, and I do think the next couple of weeks heading into the month of April, where a lot of these official visits, not so much to Georgia, but other places are going to start happening to see how Georgia really does stand in the pecking order once guys start getting a chance to make things quasi-official. I'm really curious to see. But getting back over the course of the weekend and Justin Robinson, I think, helps pick up the pace and what was otherwise a little bit of a slow start.
Give me a spot you'd like to see the next commitment come from.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Defensive line.
Yeah,
linebacker.
they're still there. They're still there with that. I mean, honestly, even if it's not a commitment, to see a big domino fall in terms of a guy like you feeling confidence about that 5-star running back, that's another thing that's out there. Because I do think that Georgia's got not just a need, but I believe an emphatic need for 2 game-changing, game-breaking running backs. And so that's a position I'm going to be watching very closely.
Yeah, I think the best way I can kind of add some more color to that comment I made a little bit earlier about Milton is I think Georgia simply has as good a shot as anyone right now with Kendall Milton because he's still looking around. He doesn't mind going across the country. He wants to play in the NFL. He likes the pedigree of the Georgia running back position. And Georgia's been recruiting him with the A-teamers consistently, almost daily, for quite a long while now.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to think about, and it's another reason to get excited about what G-Day might have in store in terms of another long line of visitors. No doubt about it. Whoever it is, Jeff Sintel will be all over it. We'll see you again next Wednesday for Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily Live. Jeff's got some great stuff planned for you on the pages of DogNation.com. You'll have a great afternoon, and we'll look forward to speaking to you then.